Good morning. I have one row to finish on this quilt, and there's a little bit of a deviation at the very bottom. Now, as a long arm quilter, we always want to get to the bottom and have kept the quilt as straight as possible. But sometimes, due to piecing irregularities and just maybe a whimsical approach to quilting, we will have some uneven edges. And I would like to show you how to handle that by using a clipping block at the bottom of this quilt. Okay, so let's zoom out so you can see how much of the quilt I have completed. I'm going to go to realign, I'm going to go into manual mode, and I'm going to do zoom full. Okay, so the blue area is what I chose not to quilt. The idea here is, this is the row that I just finished, and I have more quilting to do, and I want to make the remaining area on this quilt, I want to use a clipping block for that. So I want to show you step by step how I go about doing that. As always, you want to be very, very careful with realigning. Let's go over the steps again. I finished the previous row, I advanced the quilt, I basted around the remaining area. Then I realigned very, very carefully. So realignment is important. So here I am, I want to make a quilting block here. So I'm going to touch continue because we must do that. Now I'm going to touch the back arrow. Do you want to save the current needle position? I'm going to say yes. Now it's encouraging me to select the next pattern to quilt, but that's not what I want to do. I want to go back again with a back arrow until I see Add Edit Block. Now, on the Add Edit Block screen, I'm just going to choose Add a Block, and it asks what type of block I want to add. I'm going to choose a standard block so that I can be really clear on what this is going to affect on the quilt. So standard block it is. Now I'm going to use Mark on Quilt, and I'm going to travel around the remaining area and include some of the previous row. So I'm going to go Mark on Quilt, here's my crosshair, and I'm going to move it up past the bottom of the row that I just quilted. And I'm going to say, okay. And as I bring my needle down, I am using it to mark on quilt, and I'm going to travel around the exterior of the quilt and include part of the previous row. Now you can see where I'm marking the lines for the block, and I have taken it from the upper left down around the actual perimeter of the quilt, and I'm going back up the right side. Now when the crosshair gets even with where I started, I'm just going to say close block. And our block is closed, and I'm going to say finished. So I have identified where I want my clipping block to be. So now the fun begins. I've basted, I've marked the block that needs to be the clipping block, and now it is time to turn that standard block into a clipping block. So I'm going to go to Add Edit Block. I'm going to go Add a Block. What kind of block would you like to add? A clipping block. Please select the patterns to be affected. Now see, this is why I like to do the standard block first, because I want to identify which of the patterns are going to be affected. So I'm going to choose the upper one that's already been quilted, and choose the second one. And just because I can, I'm going to go ahead and choose the third. Now I'm going to say continue. It says, how do you want to define your clipping block? I'm going to select existing block. And you see it now, it's green, and you see the crosshair that represents where my needle is sitting. So I've identified the block, I converted it to a clipping block, IQ knows which of the patterns I have affected, and I'm going to now choose the block. It turns red to identify that I chose it, and then I'm going to say continue. Notice what happened? Everything that I had in the clipping block remained there, but the others that I had selected have been removed. So I need to now quilt the part that needs to be quilted. So on the Modify Block screen, I am finished. And it says, how do you want to handle the transition? I want the transition to be continuous along the outside edge. That would be the left, the right, and the bottom, because I'm not going to choose to stitch that partial that I've already stitched. So I want it to be continuous, and I'm going to say accept. Do you want to commit? Yes, because I understand what I've chosen and why. Now it is time for me to get past the Add Edit Block screen, finished, and that takes me to the Design Sew Quilt screen. I'm going to go to Sew Quilt, and it says select the pattern you want to quilt. Select the first pattern to quilt, this one, and then continue, and there's just one more row, so I'm not going to use Panto Sequencing Assistant. I'm just going to choose the next row. Continue, and how do I want to connect it? I want to stop and cut threads. And then I'm going to say Sew Quilt. Now it's going to go up to that previous row that I've already quilted. Let's see how that looks. Takes a single stitch, and then I'm going to say continue. Now I don't want to quilt that row, do I? I just quilted it. But you know what that gave me? That gave me the information that I was exactly where I thought I was. This is a good thing to do if you're ever in doubt. To touch restart, because I don't want to start there. And I'm going to bring my needle down to the next row, which is what I would love to quilt. So I'm putting the crosshair on the start. Now there's a bit of activity right there, so I'm just going to play with this until the red arrow is going where I want it to go. And I'm going to say OK. It takes a single stitch, and everything remains green, so that means I did get into the right location. I'm going to bring up my bobbin, and everything is going to sew that we included in our clipping block and sequenced. I sequenced the upper one so that I could use it as a reference that I was in the correct location for my bottom row. I do that a lot. That just gives me the confidence that I like. And now when I tell it to sew, it's going to sew in the area that we defined for IQ to sew. And there won't be any stopping, adjusting, stopping, none of that. IQ will stitch continuously till it gets to the other edge. Look how wonderfully it traveled right along the edge of the quilt. If I had not done the clipping block, I would have needed to stop at least 3 times and adjust the stitching, because there is a 1/4 inch or more variation along the piecing. Give it a try and let me know how you feel about it. Have a wonderful day.